What's up everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is John Marshall and I'm a web developer. And what I want to show you today is how to do form validation, which is performant and very easy to implement in Next.js. Forms are everywhere in web applications and making sure that they work correctly is very crucial for a smooth user experience. Also, it's very important that you know how to do form validation because it's very important security-wise. You have to know how to do it client-side, but also how to do a form validation on the server side. What I want to do in this video is share with you how to do validation, or in other words form validation, in a Next.js 15 project. We will look at the client side but also at the server side, so client side validation and server side validation. And for that we will use two libraries. First of all, Zod, which is a validation library. It's very easy to use, it's very mature, and it's a great library. And we'll use also a form library which is called Conform. This is, in my opinion, the best form library out there. It's the most easy one to implement, it's the fastest, and it just creates the best developer experience. Both of these work great together. They work in Next.js 15, 14, 13, whatever you use, they work perfectly, and that's exactly what I want to share with you today. And now, if you're ready to learn how to do form validation in Next.js using the two libraries, Zod and Conform, well then, sit back, relax, enjoy, learn something. I guess something like that. So now, let's go. Alright, so now let's get started. So we are now in my screen, on my screen, at my screen, or at least you should now see my screen. Really quick guys, Jan from the editing future. If you want to code along, then I have a GitHub repo down in the YouTube description. You can just copy it and then code along if you want to. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. And now, without any further ado, let's continue. So I'm currently in VS Code, and as you also see, I have already installed a brand new Next.js 15 project. So if you go right here to the package.json, you see right here Next.js 15 release candidate, and then also React 19, which is also in a release candidate state. What I've also installed is a few dependencies for shared scene UI, so Redux UI, and then also, for example, Tailwind merge. This is needed for shared scene UI to make everything work. If you look at the app folder, what I've right here is first of all a page.tsx. This is just a card component with a form, so for a first name right here, for an email, password, everything like that. And then I also right here have a success route, which just says right here in div h1, and then I just say success. Let's first of all see how it looks like. So let me open my terminal. Let's do an npm run dev to start our dev server, and this will now open in localhost 3000. So my dev server has now started, and if I go back to Chrome, you now see right here this card component. Again, let me try to explain it to you. So inside of our index page, we right here have a div which centers everything. Then I have right here this card component, as you see it, a card header with the title and a description, and then I have the form. Right here in the form, I first of all have the first div. This is for the first input, so the first name. Then we right here have the last name, then we have the email and the password and the button to create the account. So very simple. We also have the second route, which is /success, and if I open that, right here you just see this h1 which says success. So this is currently our route setup, and if we also go right here to our actions.ts file, this is where I store one server action. So you right here see an export async function, create user. Right here I marked it as use server, so that this is a server action, and then I just do a return redirect. And also you see right here I have in comment some auth stuff, so right here you should do some authentication, and once it's successful, we just redirect the user to the success route. So this is the current setup. And also if I go back to the index page, you see for the form, I gave it the action of create user, so the action is our server action. Now if I would go back to our website and would not fill out anything and would just click on create an account, you would see we would get redirected to /success. This shouldn't happen. I haven't inputted anything inside of this inputs, everything is empty, and still I can click right here this button. This should not happen. So what we have to do is do server validation. We have to validate all of the data on the server, and if the user does not input anything right here, we will just show an error message underneath the input. So how do we do that? Well, we will use a library, which is first of all Zod. Zod is a server validation library, which is quite fast and very easy to use. And in addition to Zod, we will use Conform. So what you can do right now is go to conform.guide. This is the form library, which we will use. Links are in the description. And if you don't know what Conform is, let me read through it. So Conform is a type-safe form validation library utilizing web fundamentals to progressively enhance HTML forms with full full support for server frameworks like Remix or Next.js. And right here you also see the features, and a few of them are, for example, progressive enhancement, type-safe fields, fine-grained subscription, built-in accessibility helpers, and much more. And this is the library which we'll use in addition to Zod. So Zod is, I guess, the base layer, and on top of the base layer we will then have Conform, which will show all of the form, errors, and everything like that. So if I go back to my terminal, we will first of all have to install Zod. So I will stop my dev server, clear everything, and let me do an npm izod. And since this is right here Next.js 15 release candidate project, I will also do a -- legacy peer dependencies. Let me now click on enter, and this will now install Zod. And since Zod has now been installed, we can now also install Conform. So let me right here click on tutorial, and then inside of the tutorial you see the dependencies which we need. So we first of all need Conform to React, and we also need Conform to Zod. So what I'll do right here is copy this installation command, let me paste that, and again at the end let me do a -- legacy peer dependencies. Let me now click on enter, and this will now also be installed. Alright, so we have now installed Zod and Conform, and the time has now come to make this whole server validation work. So what I want to do first of all is create a Zod schema. We will need the Zod schema so that later on Conform can actually compare our form data against our Zod schema and then throw errors if it is not equal. So what I'll do is go in the app folder, let me create a lib folder, and inside of here let's create a Zod schemas.ts file. Now this file is there to store all of the Zod schemas, and what we have to do first of all is import Zod. So let me destructure it, let's do an import Z, and let's do it from Zod. So we have now imported Zod, which means we can now create our schema. Let's try to do an export constant, let's give it a name, let me say login schema, let's make it equal to z.object, let's invoke it, and let's open that. Inside of here I can now create my fields or params, whatever you want to call it, and the first thing we have is our first name. So if you again go back to our website, right here we have a first name, last name, email, and password, and we have to create fields for these inputs. So let's first of all create right here our first name. You can spell it however you want to do it, but I just say first lowercase and then name uppercase. Then this will be equal to z dot, and now what is the first name? Well, the first name is a string, so let's say z.string. Let's invoke that, and now we said, hey, the first name should be a string and not a number, boolean, or something else. What we can do now is also give it a bit more validation. We could say minimum character length, so let's do dot min. Then let's invoke it, and as an argument I have to pass now the minimum length. So we could say 1, so we have to have at least 1 character. Then let's do also .max, and then let's say maximum of 20 characters. So we are now done with our first name. Let's now continue with the last name. This will then be also a z.string because this is in string. Let's also do a bit more validation. Let's do .minimum, let's say 1, and let's do .maximum, and let's say 25. Why not? Then let's continue. We now have our email. The email is quite interesting. This is also in string. So let's do z.string. But what I also want to do is say that this should be explicitly an email. So at the end, we can also append a .email. Let's invoke that, and now this is also done. And now the last field which we have is our password. So if you can go back, we have our first name, last name, email, and now we have our password. And then for the password, let's again write it right here, and then this will be equal to in z.string. Now you can make it whatever you want. This could be in string or a number or whatever you want to have, but in most cases the password should be in string. And now let's again do a bit more validation. Let's say .minimum length, and let's say 8. I think this is a good minimum length. And let's do .max, and for the max let's just say 28. Let's now save that, and now we have created our Zod schema. But our Zod schema is not enough. We have to now set up Conform, and Conform has to now compare our login schema, so our Zod schema, with the form data. So let's get started. I think the first thing we have to do is again go to our server action, and then inside of here let me first of all set up Conform so that it can compare our form data against the Zod schema. So right here inside of our export async function we can first of all do a constant. This will be our submission. Then this will be equal to pass with Zod. This is a helper function provided by Conform, and it's very important that you import it from @conform-2/Zod. Let's import that and now let's invoke it. Inside of here, I have to now pass our form data. So we'll get form data from the website, so what the user inputted, and I have to now compare this form data with our Zod schema. How do I get the form data? Well, I get it through the params. So right here in the params, let's get form data, and this will be of type form data. I can now pass our form data as an argument, and what I have to do now is also open right here an object, because what I have to do right here is now pass our Zod schema. So let me right here get our schema, and then this will be equal to our login schema. Our login schema is imported from our lib folder, and let me click on import. Again, the login schema is just the name of our Zod schema. So if you open the Zod schema file, you right here see an export const login schema. Let's again close that. Let's now continue. So we have now our submission, and this submission could have two states. It could be either successful or it could be failed, one of the both. And what I want to do is an if check. So underneath right here, our constant submission, we can do an if check, and we can say if submission right here dot status is not equal to success, you do that with one exclamation mark and two equal signs. And if this is not equal to success right here, you also see you only have two options, either error or success. We want to say if this is not equal to success, let's open that and let's use a return statement. I want to return our submission dot reply. Let's invoke that, and now if this right here has an error, so if the form data is not the same to our Zod schema, we will throw an error and return the message, or I guess all the errors which are inside of our form data, to our client side, so to our form. And since we are now sure that hey, everything is successful, we'll then at the end just redirect the user back to the success route. So we have now set up server validation, and if you again go back, or if you open your terminal, clear everything, and again restart your dev server with npm run dev, you will now see that we should not get redirected back to the success route. Again, because we validate our data right here, then we do an if check, and if this was not successful, we will throw an error, and if it was successful, we will redirect the user to the success route. If I go back to our right here website, let me do a hard refresh. So let me right here click on create account, and as you now see, we did not get redirected. Why didn't we get redirected? Well, it's quite simple. We didn't input anything, and that's why right here our if check has worked. So you see our submission was not successful, which means we returned right here our submission reply. And what we have to do now is actually show the error message in our form. For that, what we have to do is again go back to our page.tsx, and now we have to set up conform on the client side. A minute ago, we have set up conform on the back end, so on the server side, and now we have to set up conform on the client side to show the errors. To do that, we have to use two hooks. So first of all, one provided by React, and then also one provided by conform. So the first thing we have to do is first of all get a response from our server action, and for that we have to use a React hook which is called useActionState. So right here you see the useActionState hook is a hook that allows you to update state based on the result of a form action. So I can get first of all the state, and then I can also use the form action. Now if you use React 19 or Next.js 14, it's called useFormState as you see right here, and if you use Next.js 15 or React 19, then it's called useActionState. So if I can go back, we can now use this hook. So let me write you doing constant, then let's use these array brackets, and inside of here we'll get two things. First of all, we'll get our last result, or in other words the status, and we'll get our action, so our form action. And then this will be equal to the useActionState. Again, this is imported from React, and if you use React 18, then you have to import useFormState. Let's now import that and let's invoke it. You will now see we'll get an error, and that's because I have to pass two arguments. First of all, the server action, and then also our initial state. So for the server action, this is create user. This is how we called our server action. Let me import that from our actions, and now I also have to pass a initial state, and the initial state will just be undefined. So if I now save that, you see we still get an error, and that's because I have to pass now in my actions a previous state. So right here above or in front of our form data, let me get my previous state, and then this will be of type unknown. And then if I now save that and go back to our page.tsx, you now see the error is gone, and that's again because I added this previous state right here. Now, if you don't know why we added, then please check out the docs, they explain everything. I will create a video sometime in the future, but right now, please check out the docs, they explain everything in great detail. So we have now set up our first hook, and what I want to do now is set up our second hook, which is the conform hook. So let's do constant, let's again use these array brackets, and then this will be right here equal to use form. Now use form is imported from @conform to /react. Let me import that, and then let me invoke it and open that. Inside of here, I have to now pass a few options. So the first property I have to pass is our last result, so our status, which we get from our hook right here. Then the next property which I have to use is the onValidate callback function. Inside of here, let me invoke it, let's destructure it, let me get the form data. So you can click on Control Spacebar, you will get the form data, and let's open that. Inside of here, I want to again validate my form data on the client side. So let's do return, let's do pass with Zod, imported from @conform to Zod, and then let's invoke it. Inside of here, I have to pass my form data, let's do comma, open our object, and I again have to pass my schema. Our schema is our login schema, let's import that, and now this is also created. Now, you probably already see this is the same code as we did right here in the actions file. So we first of all validate right here on the client side, and then we also validate right here on the server side. Again, with this pass with Zod helper, it's the same code, but you want to validate on both sides, on the client and on the server. And then we are almost done. We have to add two more properties, and this is now the should validate and then also the should revalidate. So let me right here get our should validate first of all, and then this will be equal to on blur. I will explain it in a second. And then the next thing which we have is our should revalidate, and should revalidate will be equal to on input. Now what does this all mean? Let me try to explain it to you. So should validate, we set this to blur. Well, that means that the form validation should only occur when a form field loses focus. So it's called blur. And then the second one which we have is should revalidate. This means that the field should revalidate when the user tries to type in the input. So the first thing we have is when we should validate, that's when we lose focus, and we should revalidate when we again have focus. I hope this makes sense. If you think about it, it should make sense to you in a second. And since you now know that, I think we can continue. The last thing we have to do right here is for these array brackets, we have to get two things. We first of all have to get our form, and then we have to get our fields. So we have now set up right here the use action state and the use form. So conform is done, and also I guess react is done, if you can call it like that. And what we have to do now is combine our form with conform. So right here we have our form, and you see we currently get an error. So what I can do is first of all delete this action, I don't need it anymore, and we have to now connect conform with our form. That means for our form, first of all, we have to give it an ID. This will be equal to our form.id. Again, we get this right here using the use form hook. Let's again scroll down. What I also have to do is right here add an onSubmit handler. This will be equal to the form.onSubmit. And what I also need is the action. And now this action will be equal to our action. Now you might ask me, hey Jan, where do we get this action from? Well, it's quite simple. Right here we have the use action state hook, and then we right here have our action. The action is just our create user server action. Alright, so we have now combined our form with conform, and now we have to also tell our inputs that we want to use conform. So for our first input, which is the first name, we have to give it a key. For the key, this will be our fields. Again, we get our fields using the use form hook. Then let's do a dot, let's do first name, and then dot key. As you see, we get types, so if you click on Control Spacebar, you will always see the types. The second thing we have is the name, and for the name, this will be equal to fields. Then you can do in Control Spacebar, dot first name, and then let's do dot name. And then the last thing we have is the default value, and for the default value, this will be equal to our fields, dot first name, and then dot initial value. What we can do now is also show our error message. So underneath our input, I can get a p tag, and then for the p tag, let me first of all render it. Inside of here, I can then render a fields. Then let's do dot first name, since we have right here the first name, and then dot errors. Let me also style the p tag. So let's give it a class name, and let's say text red of 500. And let's do text of small. Alright, and I think this should now work. So let me go back to our website, and we get an error. So import use action state from React throws an error. Why do we get an error? Well, that's because this hook relies on the client side. So on top, let me mark it as use client, so this file, and then in theory, this should now work. Let's again go back, let's do a hard refresh, and let's now click right here on create account. You now see for the first name, we now get right here an error message. That's again because we have now set up our input with conform. What you will also see is if I type too many letters, we also get an error, string must contain at most 20 characters. So you see form validation fully works. And now let's also do the same for the last name, email and password. So right here for the second input, which is our last name, let's first of all give it in key. This will be equal to our fields, then let's do dot last name dot key. Let's also right here give it a name. For the name, this will be equal to our fields, then let's do dot last name and let's do dot name. And then the last thing we have is our default value, and this will be equal to our fields, then dot last name and dot initial value. Then let me also render the error message. So underneath the input, let's get our p tag and let me just get right here our fields. Then let's do dot last name and let's do dot errors. And then let me also style the p tag. I will again do it the same. I don't think I have to explain it. And now we have set up also our second input. Again, we gave it a key, name, default value, and a p tag. If I save that, you now also see right here, required. Let's now do it also for the email and password. So what I'll do right here is just copy the key, name, and default value. Let's go right here to our input with the email. Let me paste it right here. And we have to now change it instead of last name. This will be email. Then also instead of right here using last name, this will be email. And instead of using right here last name, let's get our email. Let me also render our error message. So the p tag, let's get that. And let's just do fields. Then let's do dot email and let's do dot errors. We can again give it a class name, so let's do class name and let's say text red 500 and let's do text of small. Let's save that. If we go back, you now also see right here in required. Alright, and since we now see that the email works, what I want you to do now is set up the password yourself, and I will do it myself, and then you will see how it works. So if you have now done it yourself, you should now see right here for the key, fields.password.key, for the name, fields.password.name, and for the default value, fields.password.initial value. For the p tag, again, fields.password.errors, and the same class name. Let's now save that. Let's again go back, and now you see required, 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 required. If I write too many letters right here for the first name, we again get an error. The same is also true for the last name. For the email, if I don't write the correct email, we see invalid email. And for the password, if I type too many letters, you also see we have too many characters. So let me now do the first name correctly. Let's do the last name also correctly. Let me do an email. And for the password, let's also do a correct password. If I now click on create account, you now see we get redirected, and that's because the server validation was successful, everything worked as it should be, and that's exactly what you want. Alright friends, we have now done server validation using the client side but also the server side. We have checked out how to use Zod using Conform. In my opinion, this is the best combination of libraries. Zod is very easy to use, it's very mature, and Conform at the same time is very easy to use, very fast and also quite mature. Now, I have already tried a lot of approaches using only Zod or using different libraries. In my opinion, the developer experience was never great, but with Conform, I finally found a library which made the developer experience 10 times better. And yeah, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you could now learn how to do server validation, but also client validation using Next.js. I hope I can see you on the next video. I hope you subscribed. I hope you liked. I hope you maybe consider becoming a channel member to get access to videos as this, or this, but also to maybe just support the channel. And I hope I can see you on the next video. So now, enjoy your day and bye.